All right, this is an interesting one. Trump fundraising email compares American soldiers or American teachers to the Taliban, and it's an explicit invitation to violence. This is from a Raw Story. The Trump-controlled Republican Party, other American neo-fascists, and the white right more generally are continuing their attack on the bogeyman, also known as the boogeyman, and moral panic known as critical race theory. That is to say, they are against teaching children history, and they are more in favor of teaching children mythology. That is step one of how to raise a generation of fascists, right? This was something that the Nazis did heavily in the 30s and 40s, was they controlled the entire school system, and they lied to all the kids and taught them a false version of history that was like, oh yes, the Jews are the bad guys, Aryans, blah blah blah, Germany is amazing, we're so great, we're the super soldiers of the world, right? That's how you indoctrinate people. Now, I don't think it's going to work as much as well this time around because of the internet being a thing. But either way, that's what they're going for. This is textbook fascism, folks. I need you all to understand this, okay? So someone says, as I explained in an earlier essay for Salon, the white right's fictive version of critical race theory has little, if any, substantive relationship to the specialized academic approach to study of social inequality described with the same term. As I wrote, the right's version of critical race theory is a type of racial bogeyman, also known as a boogeyman, or a psychological projection, a function of white racial paranoia about the browning of America and the threat of white genocide. Now, the census also announced that white people are on the decline, folks. That's right, we're losing them. The mainstream news media has largely moved on from this white supremacist attack on the country's educational institutions, and by implication an assault on truth and reality itself. This is another example of a much larger problem with the mainstream news media in America. As an institution, it is less interested in the truth and doing the work of pro-democracy journalism than in chasing the next shiny, horrible object and controversy. In turn, the American people en masse take their cues about what is important from the news media and other opinion leaders and agenda setters. So, in Tennessee, the state now proposes to levy fines beginning at $1 million on school districts where a teacher, quote, willingly violates prohibitions on discussing white privilege. $1 million on school districts if a single teacher says the term white privilege. What? 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 The white right's attempts to purge critical race theory and those who study and teach it are not peaceful. As with other moral panics, there is an emotional and financial violence and other harm inflicted on those deemed to represent a threat. To that point, teachers and other educators will lose their jobs for committing thought crimes because they dare to teach the truth about American history and its implications for the present. Educators who are committed to teaching America's real history are also experiencing fear and intimidation from being monitored in their classrooms as a pretext for firing them or inflicting other types of harm. The white right's attacks on critical race theory are already escalating to include both explicit and implied threats of physical violence. A recent fundraising email from Donald Trump Jr. on behalf of the 1776 Project PAC offers an ominous preview of the terrorism and other political violence that is being encouraged against those who dare to teach and study critical race theory. Trump Jr. begins by addressing a fellow patriot. There are people out there in the far-off corners of the world who hate everything that the USA stands for, and they have made it their life's work to destroy our country. But they're not who I'm worried about. I'm worried about the people right here in our own backyards who share the same hatred for our country as the terrorists hiding in the caves of Afghanistan. Because when President Lincoln said America will never be destroyed from the outside, if we lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves. Lincoln was talking about the same people that Trump Jr. is representing. Like, he was talking about Confederates. He was talking about racists. He was talking about slave owners. The same through line, the same people that Lincoln was talking about are the same people writing this address positively saying that Lincoln was talking about the other side. The most dangerous threats to our republic aren't hiding in caves. They're hiding in plain sight in our K-12 classrooms. They're training the next generation to hate our country, hate our freedom, and hate our Constitution. Because they know the generation taught to hate our country from kindergarten to college will be the one that destroys it and surrenders us to socialism once and for all. Huh? The radical left has been quietly taking over local school boards, one community at a time, using their legions of teachers and radical union operatives as foot soldiers to overhaul our education system right under our noses. Space. They put Marxists in classrooms across the country, teaching children not how to think, but what to think. That's literally how schools have always been. The school systems in America have always not been about how to think, but about how to be a good drone. There's a reason why they don't teach you how to balance a budget in school. They don't want you to balance a budget. They want you to fall into debt so that they can profit off of you. There's a reason they don't teach you critical thinking. There's a reason that arts are underfunded in school. It's because they want to raise drones, workers. That's all they're interested in. That's all they've always been interested in. And now we are reaching finally a point where people want to actually prepare students for the real world. And that's being met with this backlash. You need to understand, the entire school system since its inception has been history has always been American mythology. I'm 25 years old. When I was in school, it was all 1492, Columbus and the apple and the fucking, and he had a smiley face and the pictures. It was never about genocide. It was never about, killing off entire cultures. I never learned how to balance a budget. I never learned how to read a map properly. I never learned how to vote. I never learned how the branches of government worked other than what they are. They don't want you to know anything about how the world operates. They want you to just be well equipped to be the good little worker bee. That's what schools have always been. And that is the source of this backlash. So anyway, schools are no good, folks. First of all, we shouldn't even be having in-person schooling. But this is something you need to understand. This is, Trump lost. And, that doesn't, there's a fucking fly in my room. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden fascism went away. So, it's unbelievable. Yeah, we have to pledge to the flag every single morning.